Now on New Hampshire Outlook.
These are absolutely classic positive gestures. Open, double hands, moving a little bit, moving a little more slowly on television than you would in real life.
Pulling back the curtain on the presidential debates, a political debate analyst sheds light on how candidates shape their message and presentation. Plus, we'll explore the power of polls in campaign strategies. And
the guy who comes in ahead on the New Hampshire primary goes on to defeat for the nomination. So what else does one need to know about it except that it's a curse?
Hear why this man is so riled about politics as usual. We're coming off a very political week in New Hampshire. The first major Democrat and Republican debates held at St. Anselm College in Manchester are now history. But what really happened here this week? Hello, I'm Beth Carroll. Welcome to New Hampshire Outlook. I'm here at the UNH Survey Center in Durham, where more is learned about presidential candidates and the electorate than just about anywhere during campaign cycle. We'll talk to the Survey Center's director, Andy Smith, in a moment. But first, Outlook's Richard Ager pulls back the curtain on New Hampshire's political debates with an expert who explains how candidates shape their image and their presentation.
If you ask most Democrats, they'll say happy days are here again. Ask around and you'll find many Democrats can't wait for the next election.
I've never seen so much activity so early. You know, usually you just get that 5 or 10% of the activists trying to, meld together. But there's a lot of people in this country that want change and can't wait for it. And so I think that they're joining various campaigns earlier.
And those campaigns and candidates are here.
I am proud to have stood up early and said no more blank checks to this administration when it comes to Iraq. No more blank checks.
The Democratic State Convention drew about 800 supporters, but the televised debate at St. Anselm College reached millions of households. A presidential debate is about more than just choosing the individual candidates running for the office. It's about defining the issues that face the country. So naturally, the candidates aren't the only ones who want to be heard on those issues.
We want all the candidates to be saying the war needs to end, not in 2009, not in 2008. We need to bring the troops home now.
I'd like to see No Child Left Behind fixed. It's a great law and concept, but the execution just hasn't worked.
It's a campaign to make poverty history. We're trying to raise the standard of the lowest billion to a human one.
Like Lee Iacocca said, I'm back from the past, a new leader. My name is Mike Gravel, and I'm running for President of the United States for real.
Instead of just showing highlights of the debates, we asked Dr. Alan Bonner, a political debate analyst, to join us and give some pointers on how candidates shape their message and their presentation.
Look, all of us are glad that we haven't had a terrorist attack since 9/11. And I think there's some things that the Bush administration has done well. But the fact of the matter is that we live in a more dangerous world, not a less dangerous world, partly as a consequence of this president's actions.
These are absolutely classic positive gestures. Open, double hands, moving a little bit, moving a little more slowly on television than you would in real life. The elbows at about 90 degrees, the palms at about 45 degrees. You're going to make other gestures, there's going to be some movement, but that is the default position that you should return to.
So you hope that the camera's tight on you at that point.
Yeah, and they should know that there's also something at the bottom of the screen and they lift it up a little farther than they normally would.
The Patriot Act has undermined civil rights in this country. And as President of the United States, one of my first acts in office would be to move forward to have the Justice Department overturn the Patriot Act as unconstitutional.
Now, you're really judged even when you're listening. And how you listen bespeaks whether you are interested in the question or whether you've already thought up an answer and you're just going to deliver it regardless, which of course really annoys journalists. So you've got to both be listening and look like you're listening.
Everybody on this stage, we are all united, Wolf. We all believe that we need to try to end this war.
Notice how Hillary's voice gets a little nicer to listen to if she gestures. Has a tendency to loosen the vocal cords and all the muscles around here, and you just sound much more pleasant.
Well, what's her big concern there as a candidate in terms of her voice?
Well, that any candidate, man or woman, can have a tendency to get monotone. If you lock your hands and constrict yourself, you just don't have the bright qualities to your voice than if you're more enlivened and energetic.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're going to end this war when you elect a Democratic president. You need 67 votes to end this war. I love these guys who tell you they're going to stop the war. Let me tell you straight up the truth. The truth of the matter is, the only one that's emboldened the enemy has been George Bush by his policies. Not us funding the war. We're funding the safety of those troops there till we can get 67 votes.
Hold on. I want to bring Senator Clinton in. Senator Clinton, do you regret voting to authorize the president to use force against Saddam Hussein in Iraq without actually reading the National Intelligence Estimate, the classified document laying out the best U.S. intelligence at that time?
Well, I was thoroughly briefed. I knew all the arguments. I knew all of what the Defense Department, the CIA, the State Department were all saying.
She's going to have to deal with that question probably until she expresses regret. And I think we knew that about 6 months ago. It probably would have been better to craft some sort of statement, just like Obama did on cocaine. It's now behind him. It's not going to be a surprise. It's not going to be a gotcha moment later in the campaign.
Senator Edwards, you didn't read that National Intelligence Estimate either. Do you regret that?
Yeah, I think I had the information I needed. I don't think that was the question. I think one difference we do have is I think I was wrong. I should never have voted for this war. If this goes to the issue that Senator Obama raised a few minutes ago, he deserves credit for being against this war from the beginning. He was right. I was wrong.
We rank 45th in life expectancy. It is shameful that in the 21st century, we have 47 million of our fellow citizens without health care coverage. 9 million children, and the number's growing every single day. Look,
throughout the debates, lesser-known candidates such as Senator Christopher Dodd or Governor Bill Richardson got less time and questions.
2 years ago, I declared a border emergency because of the tremendous flow of drugs and illegal workers coming into my state. I deal with this issue every day. Here's my position. I would not support legislation that divided families. I would not support legislation that builds a wall, a Berlin-type wall between two countries, the way the bill in the Congress exists today.
Bill Richardson's existence in this campaign raises an interesting question. That is, by the time you've been in the Senate for a few years, you've got so many votes, one way or the other on something, that your opponents can dig them all up and find out that you were wrong on certain issues over the past 10 years. And it's really tough to carry that around with you as baggage.
And I want you to raise your hand if you believe English should be the official language of the United States.
This is the kind of question that is designed precisely to divide us.
Now, this is pretty good. I mean, with all great respect, every now and then, a newsmaker should say to a journalist, that's a ridiculous question, or it's divisive, or it's not a question that can be answered yes or no. And I think Obama's showing some leadership there.
This brings to an end our debate.
Here we are in the eye of the storm, otherwise known as the spin room. Alan, what is the function of this place?
Well, this is where the fun really begins. It's not just what you say, but it's what you said, and it's what your supporters said you said that really counts in these debates.
Who won this debate, sir?
I think that I won the debate.
The spin room is a busy place where everyone has a role to play.
I was the only one today who raised the issue about NAFTA.
Those lower in the polls are more likely to show up, while leading candidates more often just send their surrogates.
Well, I thought Senator Clinton won.
Why is it that some don't want to make that personal appearance themselves?
Well, they would have a discussion with their pollsters and their advisors and say, no, if we go down to the spin room, are we going to look desperate? Are we going to get a question we didn't want? Are we going to look like we're usurping our supporters who are already down there saying nice things to the media? And they almost drive themselves out of their minds trying to make the strategic decision about whether to come here or not.
One essential player in the spin room is the neutral observer.
I think it was a debate that just reinforced what we already knew about the race, that there were two tiers in the race. On the first tier, there's Obama and Hillary and John Edwards, and I think then there's everybody else.
Right, John, right! Right, John, right!
2 days later, amid warnings of violent weather, including a tornado warning, it was the Republicans' turn to take center stage.
Welcome to New Hampshire.
So as the Republican debate begins tonight, things anything different for the candidates to try and achieve than the Democrats did?
Well, I think it's really fascinating that each of the leading contenders has a tragic or Aristotelian flaw about them in terms of the traditional Republican core issues, such as on gay matters and on abortion. They may be the current candidate's position, or they may be an historical position, or it may have been a perceived flip-flop.
As at the Democratic debate, the top 3 Republican candidates were grouped together in the center and got the most questions.
Knowing what you know right now, was it a good decision?
Absolutely the right thing to do. It's unthinkable that you would leave Saddam Hussein in charge of Iraq and be able to fight the war on terror.
You know, where the new media environment with bloggers and with instant Googling capabilities is really helpful is in fact-checking, and it's in reality check. And what I hope the new media environment of multi-channels does for us is allow an individual at home to say, hey, I wonder if that's true. I'm going to look that up and find out. And then they don't have to take either what the candidate says or what even the commentators say as the gospel. They can find out on their own.
If there's someone here who doesn't believe English should be the official language of the United States, please speak up right now.
I think it's fine. I would like to remind you that we made treaties with Native Americans, such as the Navajos in my state, where we respect their sovereignty, and they use their native language in their deliberations. By the way, 30% of the people who are in this country illegally never came across our borders, my friends. They overstayed their visas. That's why it has to be a comprehensive approach.
Now, John McCain has been speaking for about a minute on a question where he was asked to either raise his hand or simply acknowledge, or everyone was asked to simply state whether they objected. Anybody objected to English being the official language. He got in a good little line about Navajo because they do have self-government in his state and use their own language. And then he's springboarded onto a 1-minute diatribe about immigration. Very clever, seizing the opportunity, and that's what you got to do, especially with a large field like this.
Sharp elbows.
Mayor Giuliani, there was some news here today. A Catholic bishop in Rhode Island said some words about your position on abortion.
Catholic bishop, any religion, issues of
That's
morals.
the lightning that's having an effect on our system.
As they're going to leave me alone, John. Well, I guess I'm here by myself.
A little divine censorship there?
Well, he got the biggest break in 2 ways. One is his microphone failed right as he had to speak about abortion. And second of all, he got to make a joke about divine intervention.
Look, for someone who went to parochial schools all his life, this is a very frightening thing that's happening right now.
This will actually create a bit of sympathy for him. This is going to be played over and over again, and it humanizes him. So it's interesting what fate and lightning will do.
You made, Governor Romney, this decision on abortion, opposing abortion, relatively recently. Why should conservatives out there, people who oppose abortion, believe you?
Well, people can look at my record. I'm not going to apologize for the fact that I became pro-life. I served as governor, as I was governor, as we were debating cloning, and as we were debating also embryo farming. I said Roe v. Wade has gone too far. But there's something bigger in conservatism that I don't think we've spoken about, and that is that America is a land of opportunity, and our future is going to be far brighter than our past, not just as we overcome these challenges, but as we take advantage of the new opportunity of the 21st century.
Interesting segue. I think what he was trying to do was capitalize on the fact that that was then, I have changed, I'm looking towards the future. Bit of a long hop, but he tried his best.
With the Republican debate done, it was time once again for spinning. You have to assume that all the reporters actually just finished watching this debate. Why do they have to come in here and hear handlers talk about how their candidates did?
Well, this thing is a corporation here. This debate or spectacle or whatever it is had 600 reporters across the sidewalk in a hockey arena, 100 of whom are from all over the world. It's the time that needs to be filled, I think, that's driving the process, because this was something 30, 40 years ago that reporters did individually.
Was this a fairly presented debate, or do you have issues?
I have issues with that, and I have issues how they did the Democrat debate the same way.
While some lesser-known candidates expressed their frustration at not getting more debate time, others in attendance were upset by the questions posed during the debate.
We spend more money on education than we do on the military, and somehow nobody asked questions about what we're going to do.
Education came up during the evolution question in the Republican.
Oh, my God, please.
With the big show over, it was time to look ahead.
This particular debate, I think it was good from an informational perspective. I think it was an opportunity for people who've been paying pretty close attention to learn more about the large number of candidates. In terms of having an impact going into the fall and winter, probably not all that much. We still are 6 months out.
For New Hampshire Outlook, I'm Richard Akers.
Next. Let's understand what voters are interested in, why candidates do well and why candidates don't do so well.
We'll explore the power of polls in campaign strategies. Tracking a candidate's progress through the campaign season is the work of Andy Smith here at the UNH Survey Center. Here in these seemingly innocuous cubicles, surveys are conducted that let the candidates know just where they stand in the minds of likely voters. And Andy, just where does the presidential race stand at this point?
Well, it's still really early in the race, but after the first big event, the debates this last week, I think we still had the same top three candidates on the Republican side and the Democratic side: Clinton, Obama, and Edwards on the Democratic side, and McCain, Romney, and Giuliani on the Republican side. And the second-tier candidates, I don't think they've really had an opportunity to bubble up yet. None of those second-tier on either side have bubbled up yet.
How important are polls to the candidates and to the voters?
Well, to the campaigns, they're doing their own polling as well, but it is important to try to judge yourself where you stand in the eyes of the voters, but more importantly, what are the voters thinking about, what it is that the voters like about your message. In the eyes of the voters, I think voters, the reason we see so many polls is we as the public like them. We like to read them, we like to know what's going on, this gives us a way to follow the campaign, to get a sense of who's winning and who's losing. It's, I think, a natural human trait.
Are people cooperative about answering phone calls? You got a lot of telemarketers out there, and when the phone rings, are you finding that people are really good about answering the surveys?
One of the problems that we've seen in the entire survey research industry is an increase in the percentage of people who don't talk with you, and it has not so much to do with, it has to do with things like answering machines, caller ID, but the biggest reason is that people just aren't home as much as they used to. We have to spend a lot more time contacting people and calling them back over and over and scheduling appointments at times that are convenient for the respondent. It makes our lives more difficult, but I think what we've seen is that most of the research shows that the people that are harder to get a hold of really aren't that much difference in their opinions than those people that are easier to get a hold of. So it's tough, but we're still able to do it.
And the biggest challenges that you have?
The biggest challenges we have right now are to make sure that journalists realize that the election is very early and that the polls today are not indicative of what's going to happen in January when the primary is actually held. They're snapshots of where the election is today. And one of the things it does help us do is understand how much attention voters are paying to the race. They're paying more attention than they were in 1999 or 2003 at a similar point, but they're not paying anywhere as much attention as they will be come November or December when they'll actually start to decide who they're going to vote for.
New Hampshire that different than the rest of the country when it comes to watching these races?
We pay a lot more attention than do people in other parts of the country. We have a tradition for that, plus we have the campaign apparatus here is a lot more advanced than it is in other parts of the country.
And finally, what are you working on now? What's the latest survey you got going?
We're doing a poll right now with CNN and WMUR looking at where the race stands. Right after this big event here with the debates this week, we're really interested in what issues are important. I think one of the things I'm most particularly interested in is to see if immigration is rising up. Obviously, it got talked a lot about at the Republican debate.
Okay, so we'll be looking for that next week.
Next week.
All right, Andy Smith, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next. Priesthood tell us that the two-party system is kind of sacred, and that's dumb.
Hear why this man is so riled about politics as usual. While Democratic and Republican candidates attract a lot of attention, third-party candidates fight simply to be heard. Bruce Calvin Trask from the Reform Party announced he's running for president. So is Christine Smith, a libertarian. As far as independent candidates go, there are dozens running for the White House. Chances are, however, you won't hear much from them. Ted Lowy thinks that's a bad thing for the country. He's a professor of politics and government at Cornell University. Outlook's Phil Vaughn caught up with Lowy at a recent visit to the University of New Hampshire.
I do not know any time in the life of this country when a comparable responsibility has been placed upon the people of the United States.
Few states have a political history as rich as New Hampshire's. Presidents and those who want to be cozy up to anyone old enough to vote in the primary. Republican and Democratic candidates come here early and often. We are, after all, first in the nation. But there are other parties, Green, Reform, and Libertarian, to name a few. How prominent are these parties in national politics? Not very, says Ted Lowy.
They can't last because in each state, the two major parties discriminate against them, and they cannot maintain their continuity. We didn't know what the New Deal was going to be when Roosevelt was a candidate.
Lowy teaches politics at Cornell University. He's also an author and longtime critic of America's two-party political system.
Mr. Lowy, how long have you been preaching two-party reform?
I'm not two-party reform. I'm anti-two-party. Okay. I don't think there's a way to reform our parties. That's not to say they're perfect and beyond reform. I'm saying that what is needed cannot be constitutionally done. The Democratic Party had been a Southern party. It's the Republican Party that was the liberal party. It was pro-capitalist. It was anti-government, pro-free trade.
Speaking before an audience at UNH, Lowy condemned the system, the way the two major political parties control the electoral process. This criticism is not new, but Lowy believes it's mighty important.
Political science, the priesthood, tell us that the two-party system is kind of sacred. And that's dumb. That's just plain stupid. It was a good 19th century institution that has no meaning in our 21st century at all. Mm-hmm. It's all artificial, that all issues come in twos, like the yay and the nay. Issues begin with multiple meanings, not just two sides to a thing.
And so those diverse opinions, is that the value of three-party system?
We get more representation with a three-party system, but especially if we combine it with at-large districts. The biggest abuse of democracy in America is districting.
Redistricting occurs after every census. States redraw congressional and legislative maps. With the exception of Iowa, legislators do the redrawing. Many critics say it's done to favor the incumbents. It helps them get reelected.
Why does it continue?
Because the two parties can agree on one thing: protect the two parties. That's why in each state, the legal counsel of both parties get together and they write new arrangements and they redistrict, and the leaders of the two parties agree on their mutual advantage and to keep other parties out.
Third parties have occasionally played roles in presidential politics, including the Southern Democratic Party, the Progressive Party, and even the Socialist Party of the early 1900s. More recently, there's been Ross Perot of the Reform Party, Libertarian Harry Brown, and Ralph Nader, the Green Party candidate.
But they never got anywhere, and they never could sustain beyond one election because they couldn't stay on the ballot by being able to nominate some of their own members to run for office. That's why they don't last.
Supporters of the two-party system contend there's enough diversity within those parties. Adding more choices, they say, would make the process convoluted.
So, if you ask them, should we get rid of the two-party system? Well, it would look like Israel with 10 parties, or France and Italy, where they used to have so many parties they couldn't keep a stable government. They're not the United States. This sort of thing would not happen here because the executive election of chief executives in states and the nation force parties to coalesce to improve their positions. So you wouldn't have 12 parties in the United States just because of the lack of efficiency of that much competition that chops away at the electorate. But there are social movements like unions and religious groups and so on who have large social movements that could become meaningful political parties. We're afraid of how religion has dominated the Republican Party. But it's not unusual in Europe for there to be a Christian party. The Christian Democratic Party ran Germany for a whole long time. The same was the major party in Italy for a long time. It still is one of the major parties. So there's no reason why social movements of that nature, whether they're religious, faith-based parties, whether they're union parties, whether they're black parties and so on, they should have an opportunity to form and get their own people elected in a proportional type of representation.
Another beef of Lowy's is that with the absence of a legitimate third-party choice, the two major parties often control each other.
That Richard Nixon was the last Democratic president of the 20th century. And the same with Bill Clinton. Almost everything he got credit for came off the Republican slate, the Republican agenda. He was the last Republican president of the 20th century because he couldn't govern except by Republican terms. They dominated our politics, and they still do. The question is, what about 2008? I see the Republican Party collapsing. It's already in a state of collapse now. So that's what I enjoy looking at the aesthetics of it. I have no stake in the outcome of the election. I don't care. I care about the change itself. And so I'm watching and waiting and salivating over what's going to happen next year.
New Hampshire's primary will be the first litmus test to help answer that question. For New Hampshire Outlook, I'm Phil Vaughn.
Could there be a viable third-party candidate in the 2008 election? Some are suggesting if the electorate becomes dissatisfied with the top-tier two-party candidates, it's possible someone might jump in. New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg has more than $1 billion set aside just in case. That wraps up this edition of our program from the University of New Hampshire Survey Center in Durham. Thanks for watching New Hampshire Outlook. I'm Beth Carroll. I'll see you around New Hampshire.
Thanks to the Stratford Foundation for providing continuing major funding for the production of New Hampshire Outlook.